My name is Emilee. I'm the program manager for the horticultural therapy program at Central Regional Hospital. My background, I began actually in landscaping and garden maintenance. Kind of used that as a job to get through college. Went to school for social work. My career in horticultural therapy began when I had just gotten my first job in social work at a high security treatment facility for girls. I was a shift supervisor and managing a team of 10 people, but I could see that the girls who were residents there, they were getting trained vocationally to become receptionists and to work in kitchens and to do all of these things that I considered very female specific, and also that really started off at a fairly low wage. And I could see that the girls that I was working with, they were very physical, they were very visual, and a lot of them had very stunted educations because they had been incarcerated for most of their lives. So I thought, what if I could take the skills that I had from years of landscaping and impart that to them and teach them how to get an entry-level landscaping position. I proposed that we start that, and they said, well, could you be the teacher? And I said, well, I guess I could. And it was difficult because we had to pass the whole proposal through the Denver Youth Corrections, and then I had to, once we did that, then I had to teach the class every single day, and I had to document and grade and do all the lesson plans above and beyond all of my other duties as shift supervisor. But I saw the benefits of it, and I wanted to continue with it. And as we did more of the therapeutic programming, we started seeing just such a change in the girls that we were working with, huge increases in empathy and insight into how they had impacted the communities that they had committed their crime. And so the program just continued on, and we felt that it was a success. I first heard about horticultural therapy by accident. I was telling somebody about what kind of success I was having at the high security treatment facility for girls that I was working at. And it was actually a nurse, just a random person in the community I was speaking to. And she said, oh, there's something called horticultural therapy, and Craig Hospital is doing it over in Englewood, Colorado. And Craig Hospital is a hospital for patients who have traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries. And so I filed it away, and I thought, my heart kind of leapt because I thought, wow, could actually be a career for me that can combine my social work and my horticulture experience. So I reached out to the horticultural therapist at Craig Hospital at the time, and she invited me in. We took a tour of the hospital, of the gardens, and she told me that she was actually kind of an informal instructor for the Horticultural Therapy Institute, which is where the second that I heard those words, I enrolled. And so I went and got my education from the Horticultural Therapy Institute. I had been managing a landscaping company in Denver. I applied for a position at Denver Botanic Gardens to be a lead horticulturist for the 750-acre sister site at Denver Botanic Gardens. So my job was really to find a vision for that site, and there was a lot of space, obviously. I wanted to bring more community engagement because that was something I was charged with, and at that point it just worked out perfectly. With the war coming to an end, a lot of Iraq, Afghanistan military vets were being discharged from the military, so I used the platform of the 750-acre site of Denver Botanic Gardens to start a program there for them to help them reintegrate back into the community. That was highly successful, and it's still in operation today. And then through a series of events, I ended up coming down to North Carolina, and now work at Central Regional Hospital, which is about a 400-bed psychiatric hospital. Basically work with the patients to prepare them for a discharge into the community. I've been a horticultural therapist for about 13 years. I've been a horticulturist for about 22. What led me to this work started out as something personal and has become something much larger than that. You know, I was raised in New Hampshire, in the woods of New Hampshire in a log cabin, so the forest was my best friend, and so it was something that I connected with really deeply and was a huge part of my spirituality and just who I was as a person. And so having a nature plant-based job was just natural for me. I had a lot of mentors who always really pushed me into that direction. They just saw that I would be a good nurturer. And as a result, I got to gain these amazing skills from people who were highly skilled and set a really high standard. And so I just always held that standard from the time I was 15 until now. And that's helped me progress through time. As I began developing programs, I saw how beneficial it really was. And I knew that I needed to continue that work because I wanted to reach the largest number of people I possibly could. I was working in inpatient settings that were very sterile and very black and white, concrete, squares, boxes, everything. And I can understand that from a clinical sense that we need to have controls, but life is very messy and chaotic, and so are humans, and we need a place to kind of explode out. And I find that nature can be a place that really facilitates that process in people and brings us back to our humanity. It brings us back to ourselves, to our spirituality, and to who we are as animals in this natural world. And it's such a beautiful thing that's so easy to forget in such a technological age. I've made it my mission to further this field because I can see how beneficial it is, how effective it is, and how needed it is as we get so far from nature. So throughout my career, I've worked with a large range of populations. When I was getting my bachelor's degree in social work, I did my internship with homeless youth. From there, I moved on to incarcerated female adolescents who were in this facility for committing various crimes. And then I moved to working with the community as a whole. Through the Denver Botanic Gardens, I was able to engage a large range of folks. So it might have been elders from nursing homes or community centers. They wanted to do some HT programming on our site. So they would be bussed in and we would do programming with them. We'd have children and schools come into the gardens to also do horticultural therapy there. Through that, as time went, I was able to welcome post 9/11 military veterans onto our site, which is who we predominantly worked with, the majority of the time. It's a population that's very hard to engage in so many ways, and so we found that the hands-on, practical piece of the work was extremely beneficial and motivating to them, and really using their opportunity to want to give. They want to give, they want to be productive, they do not want to be seen as someone who's taking. So we found that offering them something, that we offered them a program, but we made the program look like they were helping us. And that was the key to engaging that population. In Vermont, I worked with adolescents who had substance abuse issues and just general mental health diagnoses. And then now in North Carolina, I work at Central Regional Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital. The hospital itself serves children all the way up to, the geriatric population, but I work primarily with the adult population, so that could be between 18 all the way up to, any age, 100. The folks that we typically see at the hospital, they've been about 85% of them have been diagnosed with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, amongst other things. Lots of physical and mental health issues mixed into one with most of the folks. So yeah, I've seen a huge wide range of populations, which has been really beneficial for me as a horticultural therapist to be able to take the little tidbits of what worked here and here and here and bring it to a new population at the same time as learning so much more about how I can engage that population alone. There are many benefits to horticultural therapy that I've witnessed in the 13 years I've been practicing. I think one of the most general ones that you could say is just wellness. Overall, as a whole, There's not one person I've worked with who has not seemed to have a better sense of wellness in their life. You can go to the physical piece. Depending on the population, there's so many goals that you can target on a physical level. Building endurance, building strength, building balance. When I was working with folks who had traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries, some of the skills, if they were able to still use their hands, their arms, to try to build the fine and gross motor skills that they needed to be successful outside of a hospital. So the physical benefits are, the sky's the limit. The cognitive benefits, again, with the traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury folks, I myself am a traumatic brain injury survivor, and so I got to see firsthand how profound the grief can be when you lose a part of yourself to something that was out of your control. And that experience, as horrible as it was for me, it really did help me gain insight into the helplessness that people feel. And when you're looking at a picture of a toothbrush with a speech therapist, and you know it's a toothbrush, you know what you do with it, and you just cannot say that word, to feel that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness and shame and grief, it's profound. One of the benefits of horticultural therapy also that I've worked probably the most extensively with is the vocational aspect. You can teach people so many different skills, and in any state in the country and really anywhere in the world, you can use horticulture skills, agriculture skills, working with plants, being in nature, and even if it's just clearing a trail, you can give people these very practical skills that get them a job that usually always starts above minimum wage. And it gives them an opportunity to be in a job where you can start off entry level and you can move up through time if you show good work ethic and you're reliable. And so even if it's somebody who may not be as cognitively able to have a high-level white-collar job, you still can move up and increase the sense of dignity and sense of control that most people want in their lives. The greatest reward that I get from being a horticultural therapist, it's getting to look at so many different people, everything that makes them so unique, and getting to target in on what that one person needs, and getting to accompany them through a situation that might seem so insurmountable to them. And they may feel so alone or so unable or so marginalized and helpless to make changes. And then you get to be there with them in this, it's a clinical relationship in one sense, but it's also so much just accompanying that person. I'm not sitting in a chair across from them. I'm down on my knees right next to them pulling weeds. I'm teaching them, I'm engaging them, and so it's such an honor. I go to work every day and I know that I'm making a difference in their lives, and I know that they in turn are making just as much of an impact in my life. That's the best piece, is really seeing that moment of recognition. You see in their face that they matter to you. And to get to be the person who brings that look on their face, it's just one of the most humbling experiences of my life. When I go about planning a horticultural therapy program, I do something I try to say to everybody is, I think all the best programs actually write themselves. When you go into an environment, there's already the scaffolding of systems and people in place, and you've got to figure out how to work it into this existing structure. And so ultimately, all of the needs are sitting right there in front of you. The needs of the population that you're going to work with, the patients, whoever it may be, the needs are there, and all you have to do is figure out how you are going to address those needs within the system. From there, you can really just kind of prioritize what is the greatest need and how you can target that first, and then you can kind of work your way down and address all of the other issues. And by the time that you've done that, when you look at all of those little things that you've done as a whole, you have a program. That's how I tend to do it, and I find that it's best received that way by most of the facilities that I've worked in personally. because so many people, they don't know what horticultural therapy is, or they don't know what the benefits will be and whether it's worth the time and energy. So if you can give them little victories little by little, then all of a sudden you won the battle. In the hospital that I work at right now, which is a psychiatric hospital, we definitely have goals in place for the patients. We have long-term goals and we have short-term goals. The goals are established by the treatment team, which is usually a social worker, a psychiatrist, a doctor, what we call an advisor, which is a member of the psychosocial department, and then of course the most important role is the patient themselves. The treatment team works together to establish what goals the patient needs to be restored so that they can be discharged into the community. As a horticultural therapy program, we target short-term goals mostly. So a lot of the short-term goals are what are contributing to the success of the long-term goal that they're moving towards ultimately. When the patient gets to the treatment group or to the work crew, each day we have a roster of the names of folks that are going to be there that day, and then the short-term goal that they're there to address. So that is pre-established for us by the treatment team. So it's our goal to work towards that goal, and we also have to document on that goal every single day on a computer program that we have through the hospital. We also have group goals, and the horticultural therapist for the work crew or for the treatment team is the one who gets to establish that. So because all of our groups, our treatment groups are groups and our work crews are a group setting, we don't have any individualized programming right now just because of lack of resources. But we can establish either with the patients, decide on what a goal may be, or we can work directly with the patient to say, maybe it's, would you like to increase your social skills? Would you like to increase your ability to remember 5 plants in this garden? Whatever it may be, we get to determine that, and we'll also document on that as well. When I think about choosing activities, I am always focused on what the population is. Obviously, that's a great place to start. If I'm going to be working with children, I'm going to think about something a little bit more hands-on and more physical. And if I'm working with a geriatric group, I'm going to think about something that I can do that will keep them from having to be quite as mobile or in some dangerous situations in terms of mobility, but still want to give them the opportunity to move. Some other considerations that I have to think about continually are the average education level of the people that I work with. I work generally with people from 18 to 100. With that population, a high school level of education is standard. So I try to keep it within, maybe 9th, 10th grade level material. Sometimes I have to go a little lower, and sometimes I go higher. Just depends on the group of people I'm working with. So I find that with schizophrenic patients, there's a very big issue with short-term memory. So I had to do a lot of research about how to work with people with schizophrenia, because I was seeing that what I was putting out was not being received and connecting in the way that I thought that it would, like it did with the adolescent, incarcerated girls that I worked with. They were quick as a whip, could capture it, and they held on to everything in their mind. They didn't even have to see anything to remember. And then these folks, they need visuals. They're very visual. So I've really increased the amount of pictures and hands-on demonstrations that I've done. So definitely just thinking about what the ability levels are and also what's going to interest them. If I work with a geriatric group, I may bring in some songs, if it's songs about flowers, daisy, daisy, give me your answer due. And every single time I say that, they all start singing because it's a song that they remember. And it's a song that even if they have dementia and they can't remember their daughter's name, they can remember that song. And so it's empowering. If you try to find just generationally what's going to connect, it's going to work better. Out of all the activities I've done with patients, I would say through the whole span of populations I've worked with, I would say that being out in the garden and doing garden maintenance is probably a favorite, especially when you get to work from planting everything in the spring and maintaining it through the summer until the end of the season. That tends to be like the largest reward, mainly because it's something that most people, even just people who aren't patients, don't get to see, is the rewards of their labor very visually displayed through time. So when in mental health especially, you work towards this treatment goal and it's very abstract and it's very up here. And so you have to sit there and go, did I make progress? You know, how do I rate that? How do I assess that and measure that? And so with a garden, you can assess and measure all year long and really see what your result was. And so the satisfaction with that tends to be something that I think connects with most people. There's so many different types of collaboration that's required in horticultural therapy. It just depends on what facet of the programming you're talking about. Definitely if it's just on a small scale, if you're working within a facility that has treatment teams, that's probably the most important role, collaboration that you're going to have by far, because those people are managing the individual's situation and case and, you know, and tracking progress through time. So definitely working with them and seeing what is this person working on, what kind of growth or decline do you see, and how can I be effective in working towards that with the horticultural therapy programming. That's a huge one. Also, when I worked at Denver Botanic Gardens with post 9/11 military veterans, in order to find the veterans and get them to come to our site, we were having a difficult time finding folks who would come. And so what I ended up doing was reached out to community members, to community programs. So I reached out to local colleges, universities, who all have like veteran student affairs kind of departments. And most importantly, places where there were already people who had connections, direct one-on-one connections with the veteran themselves. So I wasn't asking the veteran to come, the person who they trusted was asking them to come to me. And then once they met me, then they built that connection to me, and then they stayed because of me and the program in general. And so I reached out to the schools, to VA hospitals, to the Denver Vet Center was one, and then also just to individual therapists who are in the community, who are particularly working with veterans. When I think of the greatest challenge of being in this career of horticultural therapy, I think of it in two ways: the personal challenges and the professional. The personal challenge is the one that hits you every day, which is frankly at this point in the field, is loneliness. When you're in this field, regardless of whether you feel you're a leader, you almost have to be a leader. And luckily I feel comfortable in that role because that's just my personality, but I know so many people who haven't. And so, you know, when I'm pushing forward and I'm trying to get a new program put into place in a certain location, I'm really on an island in a sense. And that brings me to the biggest professional challenge, which is if a facility has never heard of horticultural therapy, my whole entire role becomes educator. And as much as I love to educate, it gets very frustrating at times to have to educate people from scratch every single time. And so many people, they can conceive in an abstract way of why horticultural therapy might be of use and benefit to a facility or to a population, but they don't know what it's going to look like, and they fear that. And so part of my job is to manage their expectations and to find a way to give them an image of what could be before they have a chance to fear it. And I find that helps ease things a bit. So some of the biggest challenges are that initial point of education and setting realistic expectations about what they can assume for the future, and then actually figuring out how the program is going to fit into the system that exists. Because most of the time, there isn't place for horticultural therapy in a certain sense. There isn't a place that's just, okay, well, rec therapists, they do this, and speech therapists, they do this, and occupational therapists do this, and there's already, 10 people in those positions. All of a sudden you say, well, where does a horticultural therapist office go? Where does a horticultural therapist put a garden? How do we find funding for a horticultural therapist? What is a horticultural therapist? A lot of the times folks make assumptions that HT is going to be very much like those other disciplines, and so they think it's just going to be this smooth process, when really it takes a little bit of negotiating, and it is very different. I can leave a gym that has soccer balls and basketballs that I just did some therapeutic programming in. I can leave that there, and I can come back tomorrow and it's still there. Everything's the same. With horticultural therapy, if I don't get out and water that garden when the heat of the day is about to come, it's toast. It's gone. And so when, I've had people actually say to me, well, sometimes you just need to let it go. And I say, there is no possible way that I could let it go and still have a program. Because if I let these plants die, then tomorrow, these plants, this garden that our patients have painstakingly, lovingly developed a relationship with and have put so much time and energy, and of which the facility has put so much money, I can't just let that die on one hot day. It either has to be watered by me when I get out of work, or it needs to be allowed to be part of the living, breathing unit, which is the system that you're working in. When you're just getting started in horticultural therapy, the thing that I have found is the most important is to figure out, determine what your own sense of personal integrity is. As a gardener and as a clinician and as an employee. Something that has gotten me as far as I've gotten in this career has been that I have a certain standard, and I can honestly say I probably have never gone below that standard, because in horticultural therapy, when you're doing something so visual, your brand is what you're putting out into the world. What they see of your garden is how they think of you. And so when I do something, I do it to the utmost. And definitely there are times when you have to cut little corners here and there. I'm not saying you can't cut corners, but there has to be a certain point where you say, this is how far I'm willing to go down. So definitely maintaining a sense of integrity in your work ethic, to accept that ultimately you are going to have a lot of hours that are happening off the clock, and to really find a place in your heart and in your mind where you can resolve yourself to that because of the passion that you have for it, because it will always pay off in the long run. Hard work now always pays off in the long run in this field, from my own experience. I would definitely recommend that new people to the field reach out and try to become part of a network or a community in some way, because not only do you learn from others, but when you feel lonely and when you feel like, I just don't know how to get past this system that I'm having to work with in a facility, how do I do that? And even if you know how to do it, sometimes you just don't want to, and you feel discouraged and down and tired because you're physically tired from the work, and then you're emotionally tired from the work, and you're intellectually tired from the work. And so another person there to kind of push you through those times can be helpful. If you're new to the field, I recommend that you do your best to stay physically healthy yourself. Everything that you can do yourself is something you don't have to pay another person to do. Just take care of yourself the best as possible so that you can do as many of the tasks that you can do, and so that you can train others by leading by example. I have to say, probably the most beneficial piece of my career when it comes to horticultural therapy was being in the landscaping field. I think diversifying your plant knowledge is huge. When you're in landscaping or a job that's like that, you're put into positions where you, say if you're in garden maintenance and you go to, over the course of a month, you may visit 80 gardens. That's 80 sets of systems that you have to learn and that you have to rehearse in your mind, and you have to address the unique needs of those plants every single time. So it's a lot different than if you work at a public garden and you go to the same garden every day and you know exactly what to expect, and that's wonderful and it's luxurious, trust me, I've been there. But when you're doing landscaping, you have to figure out how to weigh the needs of the customer, the costs, there's so many different elements. It's very dynamic, and so I got to learn not only how to deal with people and setting people's expectations, but I also got to completely enrich my understanding of plant systems. And I got to be in the forefront of, okay, this is the best new annual for this year, all these different things, and these are some of the trends color-wise. It's a chartreuse black year, so so I'm going to put that in because I want this customer to be impressed and look savvy on the street. And so having some kind of experience where you have to learn that in an organic way can be sometimes even more beneficial than if you do go and get a degree where you're sitting in a classroom and you're learning these really helpful, important information, but you don't necessarily have the instincts yet to apply it.